So we didn't have any awareness or visibility on any of this. The first thing I can remember is we have a program called NICO up at Walter Reed, and guys would go up there, and it was basically an assessment for operators of your health. And that's where guys were getting the brain scans.
Yeah.
And that's when we heard about the illustrious white spots.
Mm-hmm.
And all of us were like, let's get in line. And some of our guys, especially the guys that were, primary breachers, their heads looked like a roadmap. And it was blowing the doctors away because they had not seen anything like this.
Right.
But that to me was the first time that
Yeah.
I was exposed to it.
Yeah.
But anyhow, sorry, continue.
No, you're exactly right about that. And our paper was nothing more than a descriptive paper that linked all these things together, all these conditions together. And so operator syndrome is a framework of traumatic brain injury is probably the primary point. And blast exposures are something we did not understand. We still barely do. We know a little bit more. Blast exposures cause a different form of brain injury than impact forces. So that's why those neurologists at NICO were blown away by what they were seeing because they hadn't seen it before. Nobody had. At least, nobody had. Maybe if we'd had MRIs around in the post-World War I era, we probably would have seen it, but we didn't have that technology then. So here's this descriptive paper that got published, and it's literally just a descriptive paper. I didn't have any answers at the time, I guess sort of did, but the things some of the things that you needed to do, like get a hormone panel and get a sleep study, which were not being routinely done. And it was and then I did a few podcasts, and then I started getting emails from people and meeting people and talking with more people. And again, remember, I'm a complete outsider. I'm not part of the DOD anywhere, not part of VA anywhere. And I left the VA in I won't say I was, I left under bad terms, but there were a lot of people in the VA PTSD industry who didn't appreciate the things I was doing and saying and the studies I was publishing before I left the VA. So they weren't open to what any of this. So you asked about the reception. What I would say, the reception has been a groundswell of being very well received from soldiers and their families. So grassroots up. When I did have a few conversations with various, influencers in the VA leadership and the mental health community of the VA, people who run large programs, mostly completely ignored. Never been invited to speak to any VA group ever. On this topic, except for one hospital in Orlando, one VA in Orlando, and it was just their own grassroots mental health program. They invited me. It wasn't any kind of leadership thing. And I did have couple conversations, it's probably two, with various mental health leaders who had titles. And what they had to say was, well, it's all PTSD. And I said, it's not all PTSD. Well, we have data that say it's all PTSD. What data? What fucking data do you have? Got into this with, I won't use her name or even say where she is, but she said she had 150 operators in her database. I said, great. How do you know they were operators? Well, they said they were. Oh, so you're certain that none of them may have been misleading. It's like, well, we take them at their word. Okay. Where did they serve? What branches? How many deployments? How many years? You go, well, we don't have that data. So you got nothing. And then I said, just kind of sharing with her my perspective about the lack of fear reactivity, the lack of avoidance of military related activities. And her response to that was, well, they're just in denial. So you have PTSD no matter what. If you endorse the symptoms, you have PTSD. If you don't endorse the symptoms, you're in denial and therefore have PTSD. It's kind of like the Salem witch trials,
right? Where
they would throw the accused witch into the river, and if she drowned, well, then she must have been innocent, and okay, we can forgive her. And if she floated, then she was a witch, and we had to burn her at the stake or execute her, that kind of thing. So and then we get into the admirals and the generals and the leadership at DOD, and I've been ignored there too, except that I've also been heard through the grapevine and through a couple of people with stars over the years that SOCOM does not want to engage this conversation.
I find that's a hard one to swallow because there are so many really, really sharp and good guys wearing stars at SOCOM that I've known that I'm pretty shocked that they won't take this conversation. I'm wondering if the conversation is actually getting to them or if it's being cut off before it gets to them. To me, just to give you a little framework of it, the last command I was at was with the Navy, and everybody was getting hormonal panels. Everybody was getting brain scans because of the awareness. And it was actually kind of almost a widespread, holy shit, look what's happening to us thing. Some guys were, and again, a lot of guys are getting medically retired because of it out of NICO, because of some of the severity that they're seeing.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but just to get this question in there, were the hormone panels being done by DOD, or were guys going outside of DOD for that?
Going outside. And actually that's all changed. One of the big shifts, at least on the Navy side, all that hormonal therapy and all that stuff, based on some things that happened in their community, has been shut down. And it's horrible because I can tell you that I personally knew of some 34, 35-year-old SEALs that had testosterone levels in the 100s and 200s.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
absolutely. And there's only one reason for that, right? And we're talking about it right now. So they go up, they get the white spots on the brain, they have everything you're talking about. They have it. It's not PTSD. It is a physical,
physiology.
It's physiology to the body.
Physiology.
And it's being ignored. I mean, this is something to me and for all the listeners we have out there, we've got a lot of former SEAL Green Beret guys in Congress right now. Maybe if the military leadership won't listen to this, maybe we need to get them in front of Congress, because if they're willing to listen about red food dye and food, maybe this is a hotter subject.
Well, Congressman Morgan Luttrell, former Navy SEAL, is an co-author on the Operator Syndrome paper.
So we need to get him to action this. I mean, there's quite a few former special operators now in Congress.
That's right.
It'd be great to get them all in a room and get them to act on this.
Yeah. If they invite me, I'd come speak, but nobody's invited me.
Okay. So everybody hear that. Nobody's invited them. Let's get this going.